Samuel Trapp, and I am a Von Trapp 100 years ago. Okay. But here we are on Damn Radio. Can listen to us live at damnradio.com. Can get on internationalflavor.com and find information about me. You can get on internationalflavor.podbean.com and listen to all my prior shows, just like you can on damnradio.com on podcasts. You can listen to the podcasts in that manner as well. Mine are currently spread out. You can listen to them on Apple Podcast, and there's a couple of more out there. But you can also log in. I did 3 shows over the weekend in Russian, and the talk going on in Russia about the Zelensky bomb of that Oval Office debacle was truly interesting. I listened to so many shows in Russian that I went through to try to get a different perspective, a different point of view from what we were saying in America. Although a lot of it is quite similar. And I tell you what, I got at least 4 pages of stuff to go through about diplomacy is just gone. There's none for us to deal with here, and it's stunning to me. If you feel the urge, please feel free to call in. You can call in at 573-746-8020, and I'd be happy to chat with you when you do, and we can talk about just about anything. I'd prefer that we stayed with the Zelensky topic because, like I said, there were quite a few things that happened, and there's so many. Now, I don't know if anybody's reported on this, but I know JR did about what he said once he got to England and he swore about JD Vance. But the news all over the Russian media, and I didn't hear it the first time I heard it, is that he swore at JD Vance in the Oval Office and called him, I'm going to give you a bad word. And, I know that's very rare that I swear, but if you do it in Russian, maybe it's not as bad. The word is sucha, and sucha means basically bitch. And it's you heard it said, and when you get to it, it's right when he started with J.D. Vance, and J.D. Vance was talking about something, and Zelensky turned his head away and when Vance was arguing with him, and he goes "suka" under his breath, and that means bitch. And I missed it the first time, but it's definitely there when he said it. Now he said some bad things there, but that's like on the record. And I did not hear it the first time around, and I didn't hear it until I saw somebody talking about it on Russian TV, and they said, "See what he did," and truly, you know. Well, it's only one word and you miss it, but it's like I know a lot of Russian people. I know tons of them, and especially the men. I know men who, and I know them in English too. When I was in the army, you heard it all the time from certain people. Every other word is a swear word. Every single sentence had a swear word in it. Same thing goes in Russian, especially when they're pissed off. And so there's people I know that use the word sucha or blyad, which basically are identical, and they use them all the time. And I know a guy who, especially when he's pissed off, he'll say a sentence and then every third word is blyad this, blyad, blyad, blyad. And I shouldn't talk like that, but it's a different language and maybe you don't know. And but it's once you hear it, you cannot unhear it. And look when and I can't play it on here of what it does, and I would, but I can't. I do it on my video show, and I did it in the Russian version once I saw it. But once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Unhear it. And you can see just by what he's doing and how he's reacting, he turns his head away, goes sucha, like that. And you don't. It's light, and unless you speak Russian, you will not pick it up. It sounds like he's saying, shh, like shh, but it's suka, and it's right when he turns away. And so, for those of you out learning Russian and Russian bad words, the two words for the day are sucha and blyad. And both of them mean basically the same thing. Blyad's a little worse than sucha, but it depends on the person or where you're getting your definitions from. So, sorry to put that in for you, but I didn't see it. And now I do see it. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. And Jay already told you about what was going on when Zelensky showed up and started bad mouthing the meeting that he had when he was in England. And there he is, the love of the great love of the British, and Keir Stormer, they call him. He's the Stormer. He's the next great representative, and that's unfortunate. I don't know. It looks like something's going crazy with my connection. I hope there's nothing bad here and that I can be heard properly. Yeah, I really hope so, because I'm watching some odd things flashing on my screen, and I hope it doesn't hurt anything what we're talking about. But I don't know if any of you got the opportunity to see this the other night. Marco Rubio's interview on CNN later that night, or was it Sunday morning? I don't remember. So many I've heard that I've seen that I may want to pull it up, because I might want to play some of his um, commentary that he had. If I go back in my history, I can tell you when it was. And like JR was saying, sometimes they just play by themselves. If that occurs, I apologize, but I don't intend for it to. And many, many shows I watched over the weekend. Sergei Lavrov had an interesting program as well. And CNN, like I said, interviewed J.D. Vance. And that is what, here it is, in fact. And it might kick on right when I click on it. I'll stop it right away. And so you don't hear it. And I'm not sure how I'm going to hear it anyway. It doesn't always come through on mine, and so I'm not sure I can do it because I'm not sitting in my studio. I'm off site, and so if I can't hear it, well, that means I'm probably not going to play it, and I'll just paraphrase what I was going to say. But if I turn up the volume on it, perhaps it will be able to be heard. So I'm going to try it, and hopefully I can hear it. And it was with CNN, and that lady was also in the Oval Office. And before I get started with it, and hopefully it plays, but she was subdued, I suppose would be a good word, and fair with what she was saying with Rubio. Rubio did an awesome job with what he said and with what he put out to the world that day. And the title of it, if you didn't see it, and most people don't watch CNN, I don't either, but I wanted to watch this. It's actually on Forbes, is where they put it out on YouTube, but it was CNN, a CNN interview. I truly think that CNN is trying hard to be more fair. I really do. Because when you listen to them, it's possible that they are not being as evil as they were not so long ago. Especially, they don't, because Trump beats up on them the most. He even said to this lady from the Oval Office, "Oh, you're with that substandard uh, company. What are you going to do about all that and whatnot?" And so it's somewhat interesting to me. But she was pretty nice to Rubio when they talked, and not nice. She still tried to use some gotcha questions, but not your typical. She still had a bunch of faces that she made while he was talking. But other than that, it went pretty well. I'm trying to keep an eye on my volume and what is being broadcast. But I'm going to try this, and if it doesn't work, I'll just paraphrase some of the things that he said, because I took reasonably good notes on this. But let's see if we can hear the beginning, and then we can go from there.
And my source tonight is the Secretary of State who is in that room today, Marco Rubio. Thank you so much, Secretary Rubio, for being here. We just heard from President Zelensky. He said he does not think that he owes President Trump an apology for what happened inside the Oval Office today. Do you feel otherwise? I do.
Okay, before they get to that answer, and I did hear it, so that's good news. We can hear the news coming out that I wanted to talk about, and I'm still going to keep an eye on my levels and make sure that we don't lose it in the meantime. And if that is the case, I'll be right back in just a minute. But I'm trying hard to make sure all this stays together. So Zelensky got on the news that night after all of that in Fox News. And he was saying, and he was asked 3 times by Brett Baer whether or not he needed to apologize, whether or not he said so. And Zelensky did not answer the question. Okay. Now, from this CNN interview, there were some good things that came along, and some that Rubio didn't get to. I don't want to go through his entire interview, but I do want him to answer a couple of these questions. You can hear it from him. And from my own point of view, I can tell you this. If you've listened to my show for long enough, you know that when the old Trumpster appointed and said he was going to appoint the Rubio, that I was not exactly positive. Let's call it that. I would try to be fair and say the jury's out on whether I think this guy is going to be a good Secretary of State or a bad one. But I got to tell you, so far, I've been quite impressed. He sat there in the Oval Office and didn't say a word during the entire time, was very respectful when he could have tag teamed. And Trump, I think Trump held off quite a bit. I'll get to that in just a little bit when we talk about this. But there's a lot going on worldwide about this that Zelensky, in my opinion, truly screwed up and did not understand what he was creating when he started this. But let's let Rubio ask about this, whether or not Zelensky needs to apologize. And I'm not so sure that he does. I don't think it matters whether he apologizes or not. I don't know that I'd demand it, but I think Trump did the right thing in saying this guy's not ready for not ready for peace, and let him twist in the wind for a while. Let him consider what he's doing, and we can come back when he's ready for peace. I'm not against that. But what the title of this was, you didn't see everything that led up to this, and so it starts with that.
I do, because you guys don't see, you guys only saw the end. You saw what happened today. You don't see all the things that led up to this. So let me explain. The president's been very clear. He campaigned on this. He thinks this war should have never started. He believes, and I agree, that had he been president, it never would have happened. Now here we are. He's trying to bring an end to this conflict. We've explained very clearly what our plan is here, which is we want to get the Russians to a negotiating table. We want to explore whether peace is possible. They understand this. They also understand that this agreement that was supposed to be signed today was supposed to be an agreement that binds America economically to Ukraine, which to me, as I've explained, and I think the president alluded to today, is a security guarantee in its own way, because we're involved. It's now us. It's our interests. That was all explained. That was all understood. And nonetheless, for the last 10 days, in every engagement we've had with the Ukrainians, there's been complications in getting that point across, including the public statements that President Zelensky has made. But they insisted on coming to D.C. This agreement could have been signed 5 days ago, but they insisted on coming to Washington. And there was it should have been a very clear understanding. Don't come here and create such scenario where you're going to start lecturing us about how diplomacy isn't going to work. President Zelensky took it in that direction, and it ended in a predictable outcome as a result. It's unfortunate. That wasn't supposed to be this way, but that's the path he chose. And I think, frankly, sends his country backwards in regards to achieving peace, which is what President Trump wants at the end of the day, is for this war to end. He's been as consistent as anyone can be about what his objective is here. But what?
Now, I think that's an awesome answer, and I think he did an extremely good job in answering that question. Now, from my point of view, what this means is Rubio specifically that diplomacy does exist in our government and that he's trying to get towards diplomacy. What I spoke about on my Russian versions of this show twice this weekend, and I'll get to those in just a little bit, because that was extremely interesting, because I get a lot of commentary that I read in the meantime, because it's all done by video, and they're all watching and they can make comments while I do it. And it's in Russian, and it was pretty awesome. And I try to answer all their questions when it goes in Russian, and we talk about it. And the points of view that come from the other side were interesting. But diplomacy is gone. But Rubio's saying, listen, he said we're trying to give a fund and get rid of a stalemate and talk about, instead of throwing people into a meat grinder, it's Zelensky said that Ukrainians don't care and they want they want to continue on with the war. I don't believe that. I don't believe that at all. And they say that the percentage is good. Zelensky told lies the entire time of that interview, and he told several of them. I'll get to those in just a minute. He tried to call, said, for example, let's talk about him. But damn, there's so many things that went on that day that you can't jump around to, and I don't want to play the entire what do you call it, Rubio interview, but it's about 18 minutes. Go look up under Forbes. Like I said, it's called "You Don't See All the Things That Led Up to This," and you can listen to the entire however many minutes it was and get quite a bit of good information out of it if you haven't watched it already. Now, while he was on there, he was asked about Lindsey Graham, because Lindsey Graham said that right after this meeting, and Lindsey Graham, he's a war lover. He loves his war and he loves his weapons. He loves all that. But right after that, he said, you know what? We need somebody other than Zelensky. So Lindsey Graham, who's all about installing new leaders everywhere, if you don't like them, that's his modus operandi, Uja, for quite a few years, and he's a big part of that, and he likes it. He's one of them people. Love you, give him a war, and he's gonna love it. Doesn't matter where it is, doesn't matter what it's for. He's gonna love it, and he's been that way for a long time. Never find one war that he didn't support ever. Find one incursion into another place. Try Serbia in the '99 fiasco. Kosovo. Try Kosovo. No election, no nothing. Just they said they want to be free. No referendum, no nothing. Who was there backing that? The entire U.S. is backing it to go into Kosovo and take over against those people who don't want to do it. Guarantee the same people behind the Serbia BS that is saying that they don't get to have an election with the people that are there. And the people want a new election, but we're not allowing it. No, no, no. That would be a bad thing. And so it's okay to cancel elections there. It's okay to not have them in Ukraine. It's okay to not talk about it in Ukraine. And I think it's just a mistake that we have made as a country for a very long time, interfering where our noses do not belong. And so I'm very I think my opinion has been changed about Rubio and his answer to that very first question. We may do a couple of more when we get here, but Lindsey Graham said he should resign. Trump said that when Zelensky is ready for peace, he can come back. Rubio said it won't happen when you call people names. So for years, I've said this. I had ex-wives that called me names, and it's like, okay, fine, I am that person. Assume I'm the a-hole that you say I am. How does that resolve our problem? Can we please resolve the issue? How do we get to that? Just let's put that part aside. And then they hate that. I tell you what, they never did like that about the way I argued, because they would rather call people names and call each other names and do that. And maybe for some people, that's okay. You call each other a summon, a bing, and a bing, and a bang, and you do all of that. And then everything is fine afterward. But I'm not that way, because calling people names never resolves the issue. Hating people doesn't resolve the issue. And that's what Trump kept trying to point out. It's pretty sad when I'm on the same page as Donald Trump. And it's pretty funny, in the questions that these people are asking. So Zelensky gets up there, and his first thing was, well, you can't trust that Putin. That Putin lied 20, that Putin breached deals, breached treaties 25 times. And Trump said he never breached any with me. Now, by the way, that's a complete lie. And I challenge anyone to show where Vladimir Putin has been the first to breach a treaty agreement, to breach something. Find one. I challenge anyone. Get out there and find one, and not something where the U.S. said he did in some kind of a false flag operation or something like that, but one where he really did. Okay, the Minsk Accords, he never broke them. He and Lavrov have been asking about why the Minsk Accords weren't defended for a long time. They were broken, in fact, by Ukraine and by everybody part of it. And the only reason they existed in the first place was so that they could, rearm uh, Ukraine, so they could give them enough time to rebuild a bigger army. And so that if, that they could attack and continue to keep on attacking. Everybody knew it was a false flag operation. See if they did the Budapest Agreement. See who broke that. It wasn't Russia. And so those things are false. And I'd be happy to discuss those with anybody that wants to discuss them. And then if you find something that says otherwise, I'd be happy to look at them. But it's easy to come out and say he breached contracts, he breached agreements 25 times, but never point it out. Okay, never say which ones, never say how, never say what you did in preparation for that. He wants to talk about democracy that exists in Ukraine, but there's no freedom of speech. There's no freedom of religion. There's no freedom to do anything against him. So all of his political opponents, he just jails them. And by the way, I am not against Ukraine. I am for the people of Ukraine. I'm for them. I'm for good people everywhere. And there are plenty of good people in Ukraine. They got their share of bad people, but they've been prepped for 30 years that Russia is the big bad wolf, that Putin is a B word, and that he is a killer, and that he is all that. And we have Agency for International Development has paid millions upon millions of dollars to all kinds of illegitimate, well, not illegitimate, but slanted, let's call it. If I had myself a media organization and I would badmouth Putin the whole time, sorry, having trouble swallowing or breathing or something. If I was able to do that, then maybe they'd pay me if I was going to change it. Maybe we should change the whole format of damn radio and request money from U.S. Agency for International Development to badmouth anybody that we want to, and just follow the standard leftist terminology, standard leftist crap that is thrown out by MSNBC, CNN, and related types. Okay, so you can say all of these things about the lies that came out about that Zelensky told in the Oval Office. Okay, he lied about the children that were stolen. Right now, I know quite a bit about that because it was right when the war first started. They had all of these. Now there's a lot of people who say that it's part of that this is where the deep state kids all came from. Okay, now I don't know that I go that far down the rat hole, but everybody said that all of these orphanages, which Ukraine had a good share of them, pretty little white kids with blonde hair and blue eyes, that all were Ukrainian. And in these orphanages that the Russians reported on way before the Americans did. And I heard about this from the very beginning. During that time, I was on the news channels in Russia and in Ukraine and in America and everywhere else, listening to how that war developed and listening to what was going on. And the Russians were the first to report that they found a series of orphanages in the Donbass regions, and the children were basically abandoned. No teachers, no nothing. Now, no adult, that they came in and the kids were struggling, and so they took all of those kids and transplanted them into Russia. Now they tried to find their families and do everything else according to the Russians. Now, just so you know, that could all be BS. I don't know. And Zelensky's got a different point of view, but they've been talking about this the whole time. Return those kids, but they can't identify them. They don't know which kids they are. They, and they don't know who they are. They don't have names. They don't have parents. They don't say somebody's looking. And how do we reunite them and how do we put them together, because they don't know. And there's people out there who claim that these are some of the sources for forced slavery of children and whatnot. Now, I don't know that I believe any of that, but there's plenty on both sides of that. And who knows when the truth will come out. But the Russians, of course, tell a completely different story than Ukraine says. And Ukraine has nothing to back it up. And that's what the Russians bitch about all the time. They're like, when are we going to get some facts upon this? There's another one that they talk about, and Sergei Lavrov talked about it over the weekend. So when this war first started, there was a BBC channel that played a video, and Lavrov has been complaining about this for 3 years because in the United Nations Security Council, in the Security Council, they came out and had a video, And this video, they went down a street where the Russians claimed they hadn't been there in 3 days. And they went down this street and showed evidence of torture and death of Ukrainian, men and bodies. And that these people were killed and left in this, it's war anyway. So, but they said that these people had evidence of torture and all these other things, and that there were reports that these people were just dumped in the middle of the street, and they had these videos. So, and BBC put this thing out, and Lavrov and Nebenzia from the who's the ambassador or the representative to the UN in New York, for years, for 2.5 years, have been saying, look, give us the names of any of those killed and let us find them, identify them, because they've put this out to the general media and said the Russians are slicing their people up and eating them. They didn't say that, but it was pretty nasty stuff that they were accusing the Russians of doing, and there's evidence of this and evidence of that. And they said, look, provide. We've seen this video. Provide the names of these people. Tell us where they came from, because our people haven't been in that region for 2-3 days. And so it wasn't us. We believe it's a false flag operation. Give us your investigation. Now they bitch about the same thing about Nord Stream 2 pipeline, the Severny Patok, it's called in Russian. And so they say, tell us who blew up our pipeline. Tell us where that went. Tell us how that investigation's going. It's not going well, is it? We don't know who. You claim it's some kind of Ukrainian special forces, but the Ukrainians don't have the ability to pull that off. It was either the British or the Americans. Tell us who did it. Tell us where you are in your investigation, and they never share it. So the Russians have been complaining about that for 2.5 years. Nobody's given them a name of anybody who died. No one's given them a name of any child who's missing, and no one has given them any evidence from anywhere about what went on Nord Stream 2. And so they've been complaining about this for the whole time, and that's just the first set of lies, okay? He lied about the exchange of prisoners, okay? They're saying we don't exchange prisoners. 3 times they've been set up for some of these things to exchange. Do you remember when the airplane blew up midair? With all the Ukrainian people in it, it blew up. And then they charged the Russians with blowing up the plane, sending Ukrainian people home. The Ukrainians are afraid to go home because they'll be charged with traitors if they surrendered, and they'll be sent back to the front either way. If they're unwilling, they'll be sent right back. They're like, no, we'd rather stay here and not go back to the front. They keep saying that Putin is killing citizens and have all these false flag things, that the bombs are going on here. And every time they do, the Russians point out the opposite. I don't know who's telling the truth. That's to be true. But they put all these things out with very little facts, just a little bit of information, and that's the end of it. And it's always Russia's the bad guy, and here we go. Meanwhile, Ukraine wants to come to the Oval Office and put out every one of these lies. The last one he put out had to do with stealing and jailing pastors. Okay, stealing it, and he said this to Trump. He was showing pictures, said something about the pastors, and Trump said, "Listen, do you want them back? Well, the war will be over soon. We'll make sure it's part of it, and we'll put them back." This was before the blow up in the Oval Office. Go back and listen to it. It's about 5 minutes before the blow up in the Oval Office, and he goes, "Well, they took our pastors." Now that's the pot calling the kettle black, because the Ukrainians haven't had freedom of religion. They've taken down the Russian Orthodox. They're the ones. It's like the Democrats. They always say the exact same things that they're doing and assign it to the other side. And that's how they learn it. This is diplomacy, according to the leftist mob, of which Zelensky is trying to be part of, very hard. But long and the short of it is, Rubio went through all of this. And what Trump had said was, if you wish to return prisoners, you wish to return pastors, you wish to discuss returning these children, then return when you're ready for peace, and we will get into that, right? And that's what he said in the Oval Office when he kicked this guy out and sent him packing, sent him along his way. And then So Rubio, in his place, he said, listen, there were a lot of mistakes done. You didn't know what all led up to this. He could have signed this for 5 days. Or could have signed this. This was all, he didn't need to come over, but they wanted to come over. Many believe, including me, about 50 to 60%, that he came over specifically to cause some kind of a scandal. And like I've said repeatedly over this weekend and partially in last week's show, was that, listen, he could have signed it there in Ukraine and had this deal that, no, it doesn't have security guarantees. But as Rubio pointed out, us having an investment in it is kind of a guarantee, because nobody's going to want to attack. And if it's a profitable deal and we can make it and it generates a good enough ceasefire, we need to get to the negotiating table. And we can't get to the negotiating table if you hate each other. And Putin will meet. I know he will. He will put it away. He's a diplomat for sure. Zelensky is a petulant child, a spoiled brat. Somebody called him over the weekend a red, no, the word is krasny krovavy clown. Okay, the word is clown, and he's a red and bloody clown, is how they're describing him in Russian. And they also said, pretty funny, said, there's a saying over here, there's no such thing as a former clown. In other words, once a clown, always a clown. And they say that about Zelensky. And so that's what they said. And then they added on that he was a krasny krovavy clown, a red bloody clown. And that's what that's what he is, according to them. Now, I think that he came over for himself. He did not come over thinking about what was going to happen with his people, and he certainly does not want this war to end. They spoke to him about a ceasefire many, many times. Here's his excuse for not wanting a ceasefire. Well, Putin broke ceasefires 25 times in the past. Well, really? Show us that. Trump even said in the Oval Office, he said, well, not when I'm around. He's never breached anything with me. And he was trying to tell Zelensky at that time, in my view, was trying to tell him at that time, look, pull your head out of your sphincter here, buddy. Let's put away the bad words, put away the bad talk, and let's make a deal. We're never going to get to a deal if this hate of yours, stow it. Let's come to some form of democracy, diplomacy. Come to something, and let's get moving here. I want this over. Okay. It was extremely interesting. Listen to what I'm going to stay on the Zelensky topic, although I hope I get back to or don't lose track of what I'm trying to do and get back to this video. There's a lady called Panchenka, and she's a journalist from Ukraine that was kicked out. Now, she was or ran away, and I think she's in Belarus right now, but I'm not positive. And she's had death threats. She's had things like that because she tells the truth, and her name is last name Panchenka, and you can find her, and there's probably some good translations of what she has on the YouTube channel. And I listen to her not too frequently, but I'll pull up one of her videos every couple months. So it was one over the weekend with the guy named he's an advisor to the Kremlin, and he's an older guy, and his daughter was killed in Ukraine. And his daughter was killed in Ukraine, and this guy had he said he gets them every day, and many, and they're tapered off a little bit, but he gets them very often. I'm just trying to find what his name is real quick. His name is Dugin. Panchenka is the name of the girl, and Dugin is the guy, and I forget his first name. But if I click on it, I don't want to start right away. There it went, and it started. And she has an interview, Panchenka, and they have it in a white room with zero backdrop, no windows, no nothing, and they are filming in secret somewhere so that she doesn't get killed. She's afraid of it. And I listened to that video. And basically, this guy had a very interesting approach. He said, listen, I have never been anti-Ukrainian. I am still not anti-Ukrainian. We consider the Ukrainians to be our brothers and sisters. We are one people. He said, but he said, I'm obviously paraphrasing because it was an hour and 40 minutes, and I watched almost all of it. I got an hour and 20 in, and then something came up and I didn't get to watch the rest, but I watched enough. And the interesting part was when he said, listen, the Ukrainians, he says, people ask me, how can I deal with Ukrainians that have been trained for the last 30 years to hate us? He said, by Western media, by everything that's done by the Ukrainian government, by everything. It's anti-Russian propaganda, and it's been well documented. By the way, I agree with that. And he said, but we can never abandon them. Number one, we're always going to be neighbors. So something has to happen here. Number two, how can you, if you have a body, and you have a right hand, how can you cut it off? Very interesting the way he said it. He said, would you cut off your right hand if you disagreed with it? And then he went through how it worked out with Poland. He said, the Polish and the Russians are basically the same people, over the centuries he's talking about. We had disagreements. We had various ways to go. There were times 400 years ago when this happened, 300 years ago that happened, and we split. And ever since, the splits, there have been other conflicts. When the Soviet Union was around, we found a way to work together through all of those, and they chose to go to the West, and we think that their look on the West is fine. And he said, and that might be what ultimately happens with Ukraine, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't strive to work together somehow, because we still have a common language, a common background, and a common culture. And even though the Ukrainian side has been trying to destroy it for 30 years and pretend that it never existed in the first place, you can't point ever, except after 1991, where Ukraine had their own government prior to that time, and they're something separate from Russia. He got into, and I've done it on this channel before, the word Ukraina means edge, means basically frontier. Nakrayach means on the edges. Nakrayach means you live on the edges. So the word Ukraina means frontier. And so it was the frontier of the Russian Empire. For centuries, they were out there. Okay, centuries, for hundreds of years, let's call it, which is centuries, but it's like 300-400 years. Okay, and sometimes, there was you hear the words, and the Ukrainians like to point this out, and they always say the word is Kievskaya Rus. Kievskaya means from Kiev, and Rus means Russian Narod. But they started in Kiev. That's where the headquarters was before it was in Moscow. It was Kievskaya. And so it was, they go, we're the ones who started, we're the ones who controlled all that. Well, no, not really. The empire was really a Russian empire. And that empire, at some point in the last 300-400 years, and I forget the exact, I used to know, but I don't remember, but it transferred to Moscow. But they were all basically the same people living on the edges. And when you do, and when your country is overrun by the Ottoman Empire, when it's overrun by the Mongolians, when it's overrun by the Bashkirova, when it's overrun by the Turks, when it's overrun by the Romans, and it's overrun by everybody, things kind of get mixed up. When the Polish come in and take half your country, when the Austria-Hungarians come in and take your country over, and you get run back and forth, Ukraine is the center of all of that. So the fact that they're still basically Slavic Russians is a big deal. Now, I'm all about them if they wish to abandon that kind of history, fine. But the smart move, now this is going to sound a little crazy. The smart move would be for them to live well in peace with each other. You never get to pick who your neighbor is, who's going to buy the house next door, or that you're going to live together. They're going to be neighbors. Something has to happen to get this done. there I've heard a lot of things that are just wrong about what in my opinion wrong, and you can get your news from wherever you want. You can get your opinions from wherever you want. You don't have to agree with me if you don't want to. Nobody requires it, but I'm telling you that I believe it's wrong to say that Russia started this war. This war started in 2014. And this war, there are many opinions about how it progressed. Many, both sides have some guilt in here, but you're never going to resolve it with solid, just hate. And I believe the Russian leadership is above the hate. They see the reality. And plus, they are in the catbird seat. They are in the superior position, which Trump kept telling the Green Goblin. He'd go, listen, you don't have the cards. And you're, he didn't say you've lost. He said, you're not winning. Okay. You're not winning means this is going to continue until you lose. You don't have the cards to play means you're not going to win. And now you're not winning right now. You don't have the cards. And by the way, without the United States, you really got nothing. You don't have a chance to pull an ace out of the bottom of the hole without us. With us, you might have a chance of pulling out an ace. And Zelensky goes, I'm not playing cards. He doesn't even. That is one more point I wanted to make. Having worked as an interpreter for years, I do want to tell you how it's supposed to work. Okay. Most of you already know this that listen to me, but I was an interpreter for the Nuclear Threshold Test Ban Treaty and the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. The Nuclear Threshold Test Ban Treaty, we did underground nuclear testing at the Nevada nuclear test site and in a place called Novaya Zemlya, which means new land, which is basically Arctic Circle in Russia. There was also a place in Kazakhstan where they did it. They had another testing site in Kazakhstan. And I never got to visit either one of those, although I would have loved to. But I spent a hell of a year, 9 months, 10 months at the Nevada nuclear test site. And I spent some time there. And part of my job was to interpret. I also did quite a bit in the INF treaty. And when you're the interpreter for the INF test treaty, here is how it works. And I'm just going to quickly run through how it works. So there's a colonel, a general, maybe a lieutenant colonel or a major who leads a team. When it was the INF treaty, there were 12 of us. And on the Russian side, there were 12 of us, 12 of them. And so they would have a colonel, a general. Usually they were higher ranking than our guys. They sent over people that were a little higher up on the rank ladder, right? And their interpreters, when their interpreters came over, they were usually a colonel or higher, and we were just sergeants, right? And so I spent time with all these are high level, according to any treaty, they are high level interpretation events, okay? And it's not like it is at the UN and on TV, at the UN in any sort of government place where they're all talking, and you have these people in the background that are doing what's called synchrony perevod, which is synchronized, they're simultaneous translation. So these are people who are truly gifted, and they listen in one ear or both ears and spout it out in another language. And I've never been able to do that. That is a skill that is incredible. And I got a couple stories I could tell you about that where people expected it of me and it didn't work. But I won't go into there because that's not the point of today's show. I got some great stories about that though. But I tell you that because when we would have a high level meeting, so we're working in Longhorn Army ammunition plant for the INF treaty, and on the Nevada nuclear test site when we at 60 miles away from the gates of it's a Department of Energy facility, and you're 60 miles from the gates there. It's 300 miles by 300 miles. It's a big place, and all you do is blow crap up underground nuclear testing. So it takes you 6 to 8 months to dig a hole 10 feet across, 2,000 feet deep, and stick a nuclear bomb in it, fill it back up, and blow it up. Okay, it takes a long time. And so there's a lot of boredom. And so my day would be spent with my counterpart from the other side, usually a colonel, and I would sit with him and we would shoot the crap all day in both languages and just speak, being on standby for when the important people, when something came up with the inspectors, when something came up with the scientist, and they would call us out and say, okay, we got to resolve whatever issue this is, or what are these people doing? We have a right to know what's going on there, and here are the questions we have, and we think this is wrong, and there could be disagreements. The people who run the show are not the interpreters. The people who run the show are the two colonels, the two generals, whatever they are. And so when you interpret, when that happens, here's how procedurally it would work. The two, whatever scientist had a problem or whatever worker had a problem would come up and tell whoever side the interpreter it was, look, we got to resolve this issue, okay? And we would call together the two superior parties, right? And those two parties, we would get together, and the translation went like this in practice because it's the smart way to do it. I didn't translate from English into Russian. I translated when the colonel on the other side would speak in Russian and tell my colonel what he said. Then, when he answered the question, then the interpreter for the other side would take the question and answer it. And usually I can listen to about a paragraph and paraphrase what was good. And we became pretty good friends, me and the opposing interpreters. Friends isn't good. We were good colleagues because we worked together for a good long period of time. And we got to understand each other, and we got to know our weaknesses and strengths and things like that. The guy that I remember the most was a guy named Valery Kuzmin. And Valery Kuzmin was an interpreter, a colonel, and was a professor at Moscow State University. I'm a young 27-year-old, reasonably good Russian speaker. Clearly, he was in his 40s and 50s, who knows? And he knew stuff, right? He'd been doing it for 20, 30 years. And so he was 10 times better than me. And I loved working with him. And in fact, working with him made me better. But I tell you that entire crazy story because we did the same thing when it came time to destroy intermediate range nuclear missiles at the Longhorn Army ammunition plant. And I ran into the same guy there a couple of times. And during the daily meetings, we would wear, work clothes, a set of jeans and a decent shirt. They usually gave us shirts to wear that had the logo of the on-site inspection agency because that's who we worked for. And it didn't have rank on it. They didn't want people to have what our rank was or anything. It wasn't like it was a secret, but we didn't want to put it out there to the entire team and have them use it against us. So when those informal daily this came up, that came up, those meetings came up, nothing was there. But at the end of whatever you were doing, whenever there was something formal, whenever the press was going to be there, whenever you're finishing up and you're inviting people at the very end, you would go to the Longhorn Army ammunition plant for, call it 3-4 weeks. And you would be there, destroy and crush the corpus of the shell of the intermediate range nuclear weapon. You'd blow up the warhead. You'd blow up the detonators. Everything would be gone. And it was quite an interesting process. And at the end, and so daily, you would have these small briefings with people in their work clothes and do that. But at the end of every single one, at the end of that 3-week period, at the end of the 9-month period, and several times in between, if somebody important came to see something, there would be a meeting of the people and the interpreters and the workers. If we were all together in the same thing and we're having a separate meeting where everyone's involved and it's not just daily work together, that meeting called for formal attire. That meeting called for formal protocol to sit with each other. That meeting called for recording of what was going on and keeping track of what was said, because these are formal meetings. These aren't just daily things. At that one, I was required to wear a suit. At that one, the opposing interpreter would wear a suit, and so would the two. Sometimes they wore military attire because that was, they were important people. Colonel above, that's a pretty big deal. But they didn't want me wearing my sergeant suit. And the interpreter for the other side, usually they didn't want anybody to know what his rank was either. But we became pretty much friends about that. But the people who didn't have to worry about that were the commander of the group. So I'm basically number two in this 10 to 17, 25 person group. And I'm only number two because I'm the interpreter. There may have been a couple other officers there, but the guy who ran it, if the colonel wasn't there, was me. And and we would usually have a couple other interpreters, but I outranked most of them, so it was usually me. And so at any, that's how the procedure works. If we went to one of those formal meetings in front of the press, wearing a pullover, that's somewhat, in my opinion, and certainly then no commander would have let you do it. It's kind of an insult, okay? And I've said that about Zelensky for 3 years. I think he's caused himself these heartaches of being called things like the Green Goblin, given names of that he's got, because he acts like he's above these things, and he wants everybody to know that he just dragged himself in from the front where he was protecting his country all by himself, single-handedly, and there's nothing there. Well, at the meeting on Friday, okay, and I don't know if you saw this part or not, but when he first got out of his vehicle, provided by the State Department, provided by the government, when he gets out, there was somebody that said, "Oh, geez, we see you dressed up real nice. Don't you wear a suit?" When he was in the Oval Office, somebody asked a question and said, "Do you own a tie?" And it was obviously facetious, but not really. And Trump answered it. Now Trump's the one who said, "Oh, I see you dressed up for this." Now think about that. If you say, "Oh, gee, I see you dressed up with us," is that a good thing? I don't want to say it was an insult because Trump tried to keep it low, but that's kind of what we would do if we're telling somebody, "Geez, you don't have a tie? Come on, brother. Put something on, dressed apart at least." These are formal meetings, and you're wandering around in a pair of corduroy pants and a pullover shirt, acting like you just came from somewhere, and you haven't. You don't have time to buy a tie, for God's sake. And some reporter asked him if he owned one, and Trump defended him in the Oval Office. Now I don't think he did. He goes, "Oh, no, 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 you're dressed just fine," and he wanted to make it light. But I'm telling you, that sounded planned to me. That sounds like it would be something that Trump might pull off and go, "How about you tell this clown that he needs to dress up?" And I'm telling you, that is all over the Russian press in the exact same thing. Who in the world does this guy think he is? They're going to come over and offend Americans, take people like me who've worked in the sphere before, worked in that area before, and I know that at higher level, and he's at the freaking highest level on the planet, and you can't even put on a tie. Come on. And Trump gave him a hard time for it. I think that's part of the reason that it went down. He came over, and I don't think it was a mistake. This is what Rubio said in his discussion, and he said, "Listen, you guys need to know what went on previously, and what went on previously was far more than just what happened in the Oval Office. He didn't need to come over, number one. He insisted on coming over, number two. And then he goes off on people in the Oval Office. And I already talked about this on Friday, that it's just improper to be bringing all of that crap up in front of the press. He did it because he's a leftist. He wants to support what's going on and bring it up in Europe and say that, look what I did. I stood up to that Trump. And he came over to make this big play because he's been able to get away with it for 3 years now. He could come over, he could cry in public, he could come over and say, "We need, we need, we need, we need." And all he did was sit in the Oval Office and say, "We need, we need, we need, we need." Putin bad, we're good, although we can't prove that either. How can you say, and you come over and offend uh, Trump? And how are you offending Trump? Trump is sitting there having to defend Putin because this is not the place to beat up on Putin. It is not the place. And Trump at least 3 times said, uh, he hasn't. Trump never breached any agreement that I had with him. Trump did, he did not. He did not breach one. Now that's not true because he was accused when the U.S. unilaterally backed out of the INF treaty that I was part of. That was part of it that wanted to start putting those missiles in Ukraine. And what's his name? Lavrov had another thing this meeting, an interview this weekend where he was talking about it. He said that in January of 2022, this was the final straw, okay? That he had a meeting with Anthony Blinken personally, that he had a meeting with Blinken, and he complained that the INF treaty was dead, but that the U.S. was planning. And I did not know this. This is the first time I ever heard this. And it came from Lavrov himself in an interview he gave over the weekend. And he said that he told Blinken, look, we hear you plan on putting intermediate range nuclear weapons, which aren't allowed under the INF treaty, but the INF treaty the U.S. backed out of on a pretense in 2019 under Trump. And that we hear you're going to put some back in there. Lavrov says, that's not for us. And basically, Blinken told him, well, that's, whether we place weapons in Ukraine is between us and Ukraine. You have nothing to do with that. So, meanwhile, it has nothing to do with NATO, right? This has U.S. all over it. Okay, and this is the first I've heard of it. And do you remember, JR, I know remembers because he was on the radio at the same time. This was on JR's show on KRMS. When I called in and was talking to some senator or another, or some representative or another, whoever it was, and she said that she'd been over to Ukraine and seen some of our facilities, NATO facilities, our bases where we were training Ukrainian soldiers, and there were plenty of our guys over there, and they weren't supposed to exist. And I'm telling you, there's a huge ring of truth to the fact that they were going to start putting out intermediate range nuclear weapons over there. That's what Lavrov believes. And then a month later, guess who crossed the border into the Donbass region? By referendum, but also because it was clear that nobody was going to pay them any attention, and the U.S. was going to put these weapons wherever they felt like. And if they wanted to put intermediate range nuclear weapons in there, Biden and Blinken were perfectly ready to do it. Now, I haven't seen anything else on that. I only heard Sergei Lavrov talk about it in his interview over the weekend. But I'm telling you, that perked my ears up for sure with what happened. It was indeed amazing to hear something like that coming from Lavrov. And so, you want to call Vladimir Putin a killer, a liar, a person who breaches treaties, international treaties all the time. What about us? What about us? We've been running them over like, I don't know what. We've been just running them over, grinding them into the ground for 30 years. And keep creeping east. The eastward creep is no longer a creep, it's a solid movement. And everybody knows about it. Right before the end of JR's show, he played something talking about you can certainly understand the point of view of Russia, whether you hate him or not. And that's true. And all I'm trying to tell you is the point of view of what is going on in Russia is certainly something worthy of a second look. And there's one more thing that on that same topic, okay? Well, first I want to, you know what? I'm sorry, I didn't finalize what I was talking about with Zelensky. Zelensky's English, and a lot of times, and I told you that story about the translation because sometimes the nuance of what you're saying from one language to another, especially in a language as difficult as Russian, and coming from Russian into English is no picnic either. Okay, it's not easy. And going from English into Russian is even harder. But if your native language is not English and you speak Russian, and I know tons of Russian speakers that have been here a long time, every once in a while they still miss the point. And every once in a while, especially when I'm watching TV shows or listening to people, I sometimes got to have the subtitles on so I can make sure I don't miss a word or I don't miss some slang or thing like that. Which is why it was so important to translate into your native language. Okay, so Zelensky, who's no interpreter, and some people say his English is excellent. Oh, he's so good. His English is reasonably good. Okay, um, I know plenty of people who talk like him, and they miss some of the point, especially when you ever know those people who speak Spanish or who speak Russian or who speak whatever, that when they get into a disagreement, they switch back to their native language. Like two spouses who speak one language, when they get angry, they'll switch back and start yelling at each other in their native language. It happens all the time. And they do it because they're more comfortable in that language, getting their full point across. So Zelensky, there was nothing shameful, and there would have been nothing shameful about him having an English interpreter there. He took the risk of coming in and acting the fool and maybe not understanding the tonkaste, tonkaste, the details. It's not really details, but the nuances basically of what JD Vance was saying. And he immediately switches to sucha, he says under his breath, and because he didn't want to hear what Vance had to say. And plus, he couldn't respond in English. He wouldn't say bitch out there, but he would say suha because nobody knows what it is. And he did say suha because I heard it. And once you hear it, you can't unhear it. And he did it in the Oval Office. Now, that was a clown show in the Oval Office, and it was, no matter how you slice it, disgusting. Now, Trump took his share of beatings from the liberal press over the weekend. Jen Psaki on whatever program she has, I saw a few minutes of that, and it was clearly just let's beat up on Trump. They still think that that's the way to go. You beat up on Trump, and things might go your way eventually, right? Because Trump is the bad guy, and nobody else is possibly the bad guy, let alone this poor little green man from another country who comes over with his hat in his hand and his hand out, asking for money and asking for weapons to save his people, although he truly has no interest in saving his people, from my humble opinion. Now, there are people who will chew me out for that point of view. But I have a love of all things Slavic. Everybody who knows me knows that. I think the culture is fantastic, Ukrainian and Russian. I think the people are outstanding people. And I meet a lot of them regularly. And I meet a good number of them. I don't quite understand them. They think differently than we do, but I like to learn and I like to speak with them. And they think, in general, 80% like we do. They're religious. They love their churches. They love their freedoms. They love their families. The same stuff that we want. And they don't want to be told what to do. They don't want to be told how to do it. Now, I don't mean anything bad about any of that. All I'm saying is it's time for this war to end. And Zelensky making a joke of himself on the world stage is really sad, but as the old war lover himself, Lindsey Graham, said, maybe it's time for somebody different to come along. And when he says that the people of Ukraine do not want a ceasefire, I think he's lying about that too. The bulk of the people in Ukraine have said that they're willing to give up the land that Putin already has taken to get rid of the war. They want to do it. They'll need, Zelensky, all about his security guarantees. And all Rubio kept going and saying is, look, we can't get the security guarantees till we get to the damn table. We can't get to the table till you stow away your hatred of the other side. And if you can't stow away your hatred, find somebody else who can, and let's go settle this thing. This war needs to go away. And President Trump has been nothing but clear. This war needs to go away. And you're not helping here, Zelensky monster. Green Goblin, you're just not helping at all. Now, there was another thing I wanted to say similar to that, which I said before, that there's a poll out there that this lady during the Rubio interview And I wish I remembered her name, whatever CNN reporter she is. I don't really keep track of that kind of thing. So I hope it doesn't detract from the content because it's on there. You want to go watch it? Go watch it. And on your own. I've already watched it. Really don't want to watch it again. And I can paraphrase it just as well. One of her statements toward the end of his man, I want to speak Russian about that. Выступление is the word. Is broadcast interview, whatever you want to call it. Is she said to him, so the American people, Zelensky said many times during his spat with whoever at the White House in the Oval Office, he said, "You can't trust Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin 25 times breached it." And Marco Rubio said, "Yeah, but Trump discounted that and said he's never done it with him." But we're not here to say who broke this and who breached that and who did that. We're here to get to a bargaining table. First thing you do when you get to a bargaining table, as a former lawyer can tell you, as a divorce lawyer could tell you, when the first thing I would do would be go when somebody came in to get a divorce, I'd say to them, "Look, are you sure you want a divorce? Are you still in love and you want to work this out? Because I'm no counselor. I'm no love counselor. You figure out if you want to get divorced and come see me only after you want to get a divorce, because by God, I'm not giving you your money back because I charged you $3,000 plus a filing fee, and you come back 2 weeks later and go, sorry, I want my money back. We're back in love again. Screw that. It ain't happening. So either keep your money and don't hire me, or come back when you're ready to get a divorce. And then when you sit down at the final table, it's like, look, you can pay me to fight each other and say, I hate that B word. I hate that a-hole. I hate this. I hate that. I just want to screw her over. You can do that, but you're going to end up paying $15,000 to $20,000 to get a divorce. If you agree, guess what? Typically, that number is around $2,500 to $3,000, and it's better for you. It's better for your kids. It's better all the way around. And that's how it works. You want to get divorced. So the first thing you got to do is forget all the crap. I don't want to hear it, and neither does any reasonably good judge. They don't give a crap. Just presume that he's screwing the Dallas Cowboy football team. He's screwing the 500 hookers. Who cares? She's got her legs spread for 50, for the football team. Same thing. Either way, stow that crap because nobody cares. Just get done with it. And if you're going to get a divorce, the easiest way to do it is get rid of the past, forget about all the, evilness that everybody has on either side, and move on. It's over. So make it easy upon yourselves and let's get it done. Well, what Trump is saying is Zelensky can't do that. Zelensky can't get past his hatred of Putin. And will he ever? We don't know. Lindsey Graham doesn't think so. But all he cares about is coming over here and crying. He wants to come over here and cry like a spoiled baby and go, gimme, 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 more money, more weapons, when he's already lost the war. He's already lost. That's not going to change, okay? And do you want to lose more? Do you want to lose Odessa too? Numbnuts? I shouldn't say stuff like that. Do you want to lose all of Kharkov too? You want to be out of there? You want to lose Sumy? What do you want to do here, dude? If you without us, you got nothing. You are not holding the cards. I ain't playing cards. Oops. Okay, you're not playing cards. Well, then when you're finished with your anger and with your hatred, come back when you're ready to make a deal. Any reasonable negotiator is going to tell you the exact same thing that I just told you. And don't tell me that Donald Trump is not a stellar negotiator. You can say a lot of crap about him, but that boy knows how to make a deal, right? And so I don't know what to tell you on that point, but there was a survey done, and this lady on CNN says to Marco Rubio, he goes, listen, 80%, we did a survey, and this survey is a pretty recent survey. I haven't seen it, but she mentioned it, said that 80% of respondents, 80% don't believe that Vladimir Putin would honor a ceasefire. Okay. Well, why? Because the left forever have been over here with people like Zelensky, with the entire left saying, that Putin boy, he's going to kill people. All he is he's a murderer and a killer. And they don't care about his country. They don't care that he pulled him out of the 90s. They don't care that there's many, 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 many good things over there. All they want to do is focus on the fact that he was screwing the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders. That's it. And Zelensky wants to sit there and go, yeah, but we were married for a long time, and he's a bad person. He's an a-hole, and he was screwed. Well, fine, get rid of all that crap. Fine, you're an a-hole. Fine, he's a jerk, but that ain't gonna solve the problem. Stow that crap and let's get over it. And that is how you get deals on the table. And anybody knows that. So when you have an 80% set of people that doesn't believe it, first of all, my first question is, where in the world are they getting this information? I don't believe that the true number is 80% of the public. Whatever, what's your test group? How big is your test group? Was it 30 people or was it 7,000? How many is that? And 80% don't trust Putin. And by the way, who's answering the phone? Is it grandma sitting at home, watching leftist television all day? Or is it somebody who has a job? Who is it? Where's this stuff coming from? So I don't believe it. Now, on that same note, guess who else doesn't believe it? Trump don't believe it. Trump says, well, he's never broken a deal when I've made one with him. Now, Sam says the same thing. I don't, people say he's broken deals all the time, but a lot of that is just propaganda coming out. And so, where do you get these numbers? What do you base it on? Tell me these 25 times, show it to me, these 25 times that he breached a deal. I don't believe you. Give me those numbers, and we can talk about that at the time of the negotiations and say, look, we need some kind of a guarantee that you're going to do this. Trump says in the Oval Office, he goes, don't you think that if I didn't have that already, that thought process that we could make a deal that's going to be enforceable, that I would try to make a deal? Let me handle that. I'm the negotiator, not you. Okay, because Zelensky ain't going to settle this thing. Trump is, and he's going to tell him how it's going to be done. But the only way he's going to do it is if the U.S. gets the deal that Trump already worked out. Then Trump can go to Putin with that deal and say, "Listen, part of that deal allows us to be in the eastern half of Ukraine, and we're trying to make money over there. But I will tell you that we have every right to work with Ukraine and put in intermediate range nuclear weapons, like you heard from Blinken, but we will take that off the table if we can work together on this, and we will sign a new contract about intermediate range nuclear weapons. We'll pull them out of the places we've put them in Eastern Europe after we even pulled out of the agreement. We'll go back to the terms of that agreement. By the way, it's extremely foolish to get out of that anyway. We're creating a much safer world. And so that might be something that you could reasonably get people to agree to, don't you think? And I don't know, maybe not. Maybe what Lavrov said isn't true, but who knows? That's the first time I've heard of it was when Lavrov said it over the weekend. But it's out there now. Okay. So the bloody clown has no interest in a ceasefire, none at all. And Putin doesn't unless it's a final end to the war. Putin won't take some kind of a ceasefire that gives Ukraine time to rearm, redo everything, and then start up all over again. He doesn't want something that in 3 years a new president comes along and he's going to have to start up the war all over again. He doesn't want to have an agreement where he and Trump say, look, for the next 100 years, we're not going to do INF things, and we're not going to put intermediate range weapons in Ukraine, and we're going to pull them out of Europe, and you get rid of the ones you got. Well, let's go back to that treaty because that treaty was a good idea. And by the way, let's get rid of nuclear weapons half the amount because we both said that was a good idea about a month ago. These are great ideas. These are things that should be talked about. And but nobody's talking about that because some red bloody clown doesn't want to talk about anything but hate and talk about the past and how his wife cheated on him. And by the way, if the war stops, he loses his job. He will no longer be the president of Ukraine because he has to have elections and he will lose. Unless, of course, he jails all of his opponents like he's doing right now, charges them all with crimes, puts them on ankle monitors so they can still go to their parliament meetings, but really keeps an eye on them, accuses them of corruption, accuses them whatever. Trump said he's going to start an investigation into him. This came up over the weekend, too. There's so many things that happened that I could talk about that I still have. Jesus, I still got a page and a half of things to talk about. Think about this. if this war stops, the deep state, even in Europe, loses access to free US money, right? So the more they can keep this war going, the more they can squeeze us for more money on the European side too. And Zelensky knows that. If he can keep this war going for another year, they claim that and the Europeans have said, oh, geez, oh, and Rubio said this too. He said, I'm not going to tell you what person told me this, what British foreign leader, British, what EC foreign leader told me this, foreign minister, but they told me if you can keep it going another year, the Russians will capitulate. That's nonsense, by the way. The Russians are quite strong right now. If anybody should capitulate, it's on, you don't hold the cards, Z-Man. You don't hold them. And it's something's going to happen. But the Russians aren't going to capitulate. Anybody who thinks that is smoking the wacky weed. A couple other things over the weekend. Think about this. There's news that the U.S. might want out of the World Bank and the IMF. And I learned something that I didn't know. Now, everybody knows that both of those agent or organizations are run by the West, by the U.S. virtually. So when somebody wants a loan from the World Bank, when some country wants a loan from the World Bank, they need an 85% agreement from the bank's members. China, for example, holds 6% of the interest in the World Bank and the IMF both. And they need an 85% approval among all the members in order to get approved for a loan from the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank. And most of them are run by the West, 80% of the time by an American in the banking industry. And the US holds how much? 16% of both. So if the US says no, can you ever get to 85%? Nope. That means that you have to have the US approval to get anywhere if you want a World Bank loan or you want anything. So who controls whether some third world country can get a few $billions to build a new port somewhere? You want to know why people are running to China for their road and bridge incentives? It's because of this. It's because the US has a complete veto power to give you any money. Now, I always knew that was true, but I honestly did not know until this weekend the percentages specifically. And a lot of people are saying that the US wants out. Guess who wants in? China. No, I'm not against any of that stuff. The rest of the world has been craving a change in leadership of these organizations in this unipolar world where the US controls the dollar, US controls all the money from the IMF, US controls the World Bank, US controls the SWIFT system, and all those things. That's why people are going to BRICS. If we pull out of those things and you have something more fair, that you have to have a real coalition instead of the coalition that must include the US, or you change the rules of how it works, perhaps you'll get a more fair system. And people like India don't have to complain that they don't have a say in anything that goes on anywhere. Same thing goes with the UN Security Council. Same thing goes with the United Nations itself. Same thing goes with how they give money for any project anywhere, and all of those things are very important to talk about. I want to talk a little bit more about the old and Jr. talked about this on his show. The 70% of the funding of NATO comes from the United States, and I think that is a shame. We're not the only ones in North America, and NATO pays. Canada pays about 4%. Those numbers, there are numbers, and somebody sent me that list too, that shows some of the things uh, that that people should focus upon, but not many do. When it comes to that on NATO. And why should we pay 70% of the Ukrainian layout to defend Europe? Why should we? I don't know. Maybe we should, but what do we get from it? Nothing. Nothing. unless Trump, and we were just giving money to them. All the other European countries are signing a loan, and they get a loan. Now, I heard something real interesting uh, on that front in particular. Somebody said over the weekend, and this again probably came from the Russian side, but it might have been the Indian Times of India that it came from. I can't remember where I exactly read it, and I don't want to spend some time going and trying to find out what it is. But the talk is that Zelensky intentionally did this so he didn't have to sign the contract, and he wanted to come over and blame it on these security guarantees that he was never going to get because, and get this is interesting if it's true, but they say it's true in India and they say it's true in on the Russian side of the planet, that Zelensky could not sign a deal with Trump for America. Now I don't know if it's true or not, but go look up your own stuff. I just hear it and I put it out there. I will also look it up and see if I can find any basis for this, but I didn't have any time to. That Zelensky could not sign the agreement with the United States. Why? Because he had already signed one with England and the EC, guarantees of payments using their rare earth resources to guarantee the note. So if you've already given them away, you cannot give them away again unless you get Starmer or whatever counterpart is there to walk away, to do something different. And perhaps that is why the French, the British, and I don't know this to be true, but it certainly makes sense, wouldn't it? That the French, the British, whoever else came over to see Trump in the last week, were working with him on this and going, look, we can make sure you get your guarantee, your 50% that you were looking for, but we also have an interest in that because we have notes that need to be paid back too. Well, we'll work that out. We'll work that part out between ourselves later. We need Zelensky to sign this, and if he wants our support, if you want our support, England, you want our support, EC, then you're going to figure out how to get this done. And if you get this done, then we will assist you. If not, have a nice day. We're not going to do it. So that could be part of the reason. But I don't know the secrets of all of this. All I know is that sounds reasonable to me. There was everybody's calling it the Zelensky thing. When he came over to start with the U.S., he was supposed to come over here and have something worthwhile to take home to all of his folks. And that means money, that means weapons from the Americans, because every time he's come over before, he's received those. And if he throws a tantrum, he'll get what he wants, from the Americans. And this time it did not work. But that's no big problem, because as soon as he got to England, he got a huge hug from Starmer. Said, "Sorry, poor little boy. We feel you. Working with that big bad Donald Trump is so horrible, and we're so sorry you had to go through that. And how could he treat you so poorly in the White House? Even though you weren't in a suit, even though you treated people without respect, even though you had your arms crossed the whole time and were clearly unhappy to be there, even though your own ambassador had her head in her hands, from shame the whole time, even though you called somebody a sucha, even though you've done it again in England right when you arrived." Said that J.D. Vance, he's a B word. And, so he said it straight up there. And there they reported, but he also did it in the Oval Office. And so, and remember, and there's another Russian word. The Russian word of the day I'm going to give you is perhaps something that you should write down and learn and live and love, especially in the Ozarks, because the word for hillbilly, hick, redneck, trailer trash, something like that. That word in Russian, and this is what they've been calling Zelensky, some guy over there, and they call him something, and it's different, and it's called bidla, and their e's are a little bit more like so it's bidla. You got to kind of bidla when you say it, and I have a hard time with that even today. But bidla is not correct; it's bidla, and so when you put that out there, but a bidla is trailer trash, hick, redneck. just so you know. And that is our word of the day. And so when you learn those things, you only learn them by watching Russian speaking television. And I've heard that one several times over the years, but every time I hear it, it's been a while and I have to look it up. So I had to look it up today and I was like, damn it, I know that word, but I don't remember what it means. And I had to go look up bidla. And I was like, oh, yeah, I remember that. Redneck, trailer trash. And that's what they are saying about Zelensky in Russia even now, is that he, what такое быдло, he's just he's a red bloody clown, a red bloody bloodthirsty is really the right word, krasny kровавый clone. And Kravovi means a bloodlust of some sort. Means he's a bloody, a bloodthirsty. Is also a good word. And he doesn't care about his people. He doesn't care about ending this war. And you can agree or disagree on all of those things. And if I've made a mistake in anything, especially in the Russian, I'm sure somebody that speaks Russian will let me know. Because as I've said, and we're nearing the end of my shoe, which isn't really a shoe. The big shoe is in another place. We are nearing the end of it, and I wanted to tell you that you can find my shows at thedamradio.com. There's a podcast tab there, which you can go back and see every prior show. My show is also at internationalflavor.podbean, P-O-D, bean.com, and you can download all my shows there or listen to them live as they go on. And the Russian version is internationalflavorrussian.podbean.com. And all of my shows might take 4 to 6 hours to upload, but they all upload and all of them are available to listen. And they come out on iTunes, iHeartRadio, the Spotify, whatever, Amazon. Those they come out on 6, 8 different channels there, so you'll be able to find them. But the place where they start is a place called Podbean. And Podbean, you can find both of my programs. You can also go to YouTube and put in at Samuel Trapp, and you will come to the Russian speaking version. Or you can go to at International Flavor, and my shows also come back in a podcast form on YouTube. So they're available on YouTube as well, but again, it takes several hours for them to load up. I very much appreciate all of you listening today, and I hope you find my rants enlightening, useful. Maybe you don't agree. You don't have to. Everybody has the freedom to believe what they wish to believe as it comes to it. And but that doesn't mean I'm not glad to have you, because I am very glad to have you. Now it'll take me a minute to figure out how to load up JR's show. So the show is over, but I might still say a few words so you don't have dead air while I figure out how to put up the show that JR was talking about from I think it was the Bill O'Reilly Monster, where this show was coming. And if you need any links from me, my Samuel T at internationalflavor.com is my email, and I would be happy to speak with you on anything that I spoke of today, or listen to your commentary, nice or not, in that manner if you wish to send it to me directly. So give me just a minute and I'm going to babble so we don't have dead air. But my show is over, and you just got to wait to hear from Bill O'Reilly. Have a good evening. If I